Hello and welcome to GYDA Podcast. A special one today. We've got Paul Sullivan from Arise GTM. Hello, Paul.
Hi, Rob. How you doing?
Very good. Very, very good, actually. Splendidly, wonderfully good. And delighted that Paul has got a book. He's got a book out. So without further ado, Paul, just give us some background about why the book. Why you? What rights? Where's it come from? What are you doing with it? Go!
Yeah, okay. So as an ex GYDA person, I suppose you have to lean into the learnings and the education of the program, which is about differentiation, niching down, becoming like the expert in the field. And, you know, I've got 15 years now experience of working with tech firms and financial firms, right? So Fintech, B2B SaaS, specifically that area. And I think what happened really was, as you know some of my stories, that the whole growth problem for me was always around recruitment. I don't think I have a problem selling, but I didn't always communicate my value out really, really well. And then I had a call with you and Jan, and I think you both laughed at me because I'd overdone the work around like sales enablement and the whole front to back structure. And it wasn't you were laughing at me in terms of this is ridiculous, but you did say it was ridiculous for an agency my size to have gone this deep into the structure and all of that stuff, right? So it was double-edged sword, but yeah, for sure, and that stuck with me. But I think that, you know, over time, a lot of people tell you to say yes and figure it out later, and that has never ever worked for me. It just hasn't, right? And I like structure. I can be creative within a structure, so I like a structure. And I was always kind of wondering, why didn't I ever go through that 6-7 person ceiling? I hit it, I bounce back. I hit it, I bounce back. And I was like, why is this not happening? And then COVID comes, right? And now all of a sudden, you have to take stock of your business. You're looking at the team. You're wondering, are these the guys that are going to actually take me somewhere? And do I furlough the team, or do I just go back and go solo? And actually, it was like, no, they're not, because whilst I understand as founders, we have the innate drive. That's why we're doing what we're doing. We have that drive. And I don't expect everyone to drive the way I drive, but I do expect some driving, right? I'm not there to drive the ship, steer the ship, mount the oars and do all the other stuff. And so I was like, well, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. I don't want to carry people. I want some people to help carry the load. But Paul, why do you not get through that six person barrier? What is it? What is it there? And so, you know, COVID comes in, I take a bounce back loan. I have 4 or 5 long-standing relationships with customers, and I'm sitting indoors and I'm like, right, I've got to figure this out. So why do we do so well? 12 awards, International Business Award. You're doing some things right for your customers. Why is this not happening in your business? Age-old problem at GYDA. Why is it that you can do for your clients, but you can't do for yourself, right? It's simple. And so I started to document these processes that we do, and all these swipe files. And I was like, Jesus, I have a lot of stuff. And now it's not all up in Paul's head. We can put it into some kind of framework. And that's how Arise became. You know, and I've lent into the GYDA conversations. I think I introduced you to Max Trader, and in my time, I've come across these people like niche, and yeah, so that was it. Arise. What was my differentiator? Well, I now have a bona fide methodology that I've used with loads of people that wasn't structured and productized in that way originally, but now I do. Assess, research, ideate, strategize, execute. Easy to understand. It's not radical. I've taken some of the best well-known frameworks in optimization and just weaved a really good, strong story with them, right? And then I started to think about, well, what are the problems in go-to-market? And I think the biggest problem is all salespeople think they do go-to-market. I think that's the biggest problem in the world, right? You go on LinkedIn, I do sales, I do go-to-market, here's my tech stack, and this is how you use it. And I'm like, well, you've missed out a whole ton of information that you need to have in your hand before you can get there. Because actually, the framework should look something like business strategy, people strategy, technology strategy, not any other way, because yeah, right. You want
right. So let's just step back one stage. Who's simple one sentence answers? Who's the book for?
Founders and people involved in the go-to-market process.
Why did you write it?
I wrote it because I felt it needs to be simplified and you needed something simple to follow.
How long does it take?
It takes less than 30 days.
To implement your plan?
Yeah, to implement the framework, yeah.
All right. So the plan is let's get into the book. Okay. So the plan is, the book is 3 questions.
Yep.
8 what do you call them?
Pillars.
Pillars, thank you very much. And then 5
Yep.
steps. Okay.
5 steps, yeah.
So let's I want to know 3 questions. Go on, what are these 3 questions?
Right. No matter what size business you are in, the 3 questions you will always need to ask are: number 1, how do I convey the value of my product or service to my end user or buyer? That's the first question you're going to have to answer. The second question is, how do I enable my buyer to buy from me? Right? B2B world's complex, more decision makers, you need to understand who you're selling to. And the last one, often underserved, is how do I plan to onboard, retain, upsell, and cross-sell my customer once I have them? And no matter how big your organization is, yes, more people will be involved in answering that, but the same 3 questions, they roll up.
Okay. So just for the benefit of us who aren't up to speed with the book as much as you are, the 3 questions are:
how do I convey the value of my product or service to my end user or buyer?
Great. 2,
how do I enable my buyer to buy from me?
nice. And 3,
how do I plan to onboard, retain, upsell, and cross-sell my customer once I have them?
okay. Well, we'll come to the pillars, and we'll come to the steps in a minute. So your opener I adore, because it's the kind of, why should people bother to buy from me when they can buy from the competition type question. So and that's kind of the $1 million question that everyone's always asking themselves, which is like, why can't I sell more stuff? Why aren't I standing out? Why do I look like everyone else? Why is it when I can see who the buyer is, the buyer doesn't lean across and come and pick me up, and they go to a competitor who's not as nice, not as good, not doing? So what's your shtick here? What's your angle here?
If I was honest, it's probably one of 2 things. You're either very bland and so vanilla, and so no one cares, or you try too hard and you do what I call intelligent signaling, when you get full of gobbledygook and jargon, and then people still don't know what you're doing. So you're either bland or you overcook it. What I've found through 5-6 years of doing this is that the more simple you make it, the easier people find to attach to the idea.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about differentiation, I think people look far too deep into what that means. And what differentiation really means is, how do you stand out? And not in the way of using large jargon, technical language, language you use inside your business. Actually, go and speak to your audience and figure out the language they use, because that's probably the easiest win in doing that.
I'm going to be a bit like a 4-year-old now, but how do you do that?
So you've got to speak to your audience, like literally go and speak to your customer and say, hey, we say that we do this. How do you guys talk about that internally? And more so, you should be doing that in the sales process, let alone in the research process. It's entwined, but for sure, use the language your customers use, or use simple language. And I've got a cheat on how people can do that.
You can't just leave it there.
Okay, right. So if you're intelligent signaling, well, it's probably 90% of the market's doing. What you should do is you should lift the copy from your hero section on your homepage, drop it into ChatGPT, and ask ChatGPT to rewrite the headline with CEFR language 16, which basically is the European language standards for a 16-year-old, and it will simplify what you're trying to say so a 16-year-old could explain it. That is probably one of the best tricks you could do with your website and your hero page.
That's CEFR. You just type in CEFR?
CEFR language standard 16. There's 16, 18, and 25 it caps out, but 16 to 18 is going to be good. So that simplifies it enough.
Right. Okay. So why is it you think that, we've all been around the block and we do this differentiation and we do this branding and we do this, our new product, our new service, but we do it internally and we create the color scheme that we like, and we use our language to describe our product and service to them. But what we don't do is we don't do it as you're saying, start with end in mind. Who is it and why would they buy it, and how would they use it, and what would they find attractive? We don't fish where the fish are. We design the fishing rod based on what we think the fish ought to want to like because of what we do and how we do it. It feels so 101, so basic a thing. Talk to your customers. Why do you think people aren't doing that?
I think, the intelligence piece, like that intelligence signaling piece, for sure. I feel like as a founder, from my own experience and talking to people, there's an inherent fear of missing out. And so because we've got that fear on the surface, what really we're acting out is, does anyone believe I'm credible? And so what we start doing is we behave to reinforce who we are, forgetting that you become credible when you start talking to people and you solve their problems. You can't be credible first. It's actually the reverse of that, right? So you have to simplify the message to a very honed degree. And if someone recognizes that as their problem, then they will want to talk to you. It's not more difficult to that. But in case I didn't answer that right, we get scared. We want to sound super intelligent because that reinforces to us who we are. And we forget that we're trying to engage with people who are also intelligent, but are trying to solve a problem. And so in line with what you said, it's almost like we build the rod, we dig the hole, we fill it with water, and we wonder where the fish are, because the fish aren't in the hole that we just dug, right? You have to go and understand how your customer is going to find you. And I think the best thing that I had discovered during all of this was the jobs to be done framework.
Yes, lovely.
Right? Because jobs to be done isn't about how do I reverse engineer someone to find me, which everyone does with personas. I sell marketing, so I sell to the CMO. You probably don't. It's probably the marketing manager who upsells you to the CMO. But right, you see where I'm going with this, right? Yeah. So I sell marketing. I must speak to the decision maker, so it must be a C-suite person, and therefore you've made all of this up. And actually, what you probably want to do is speak to the largest swathe of your customer base and potential customer base, and say who makes the decision and who does the hunting, because the hunter's probably the lowest person on the rung. The decision maker is somewhere in the middle, and the financial decision maker will be the C-suite, right? And it really plays out that way. And I think that's why jobs to be done helps you understand that if we're just talking from the agency mindset, you'll understand that when someone's figuring out their problem and they're navigating, understanding what their problem is, giving it a name, figuring out whether they can solve that internally first or externally second, and then looking at what their external options are. Their external options are never just your agency. They are agencies that look like you, consultants that look like you, fractionals that look like you, Fiverr, Upwork, someone's nephew sitting in their bedroom. And you've got to be able to be prepared to differentiate yourself from all those. It's never as straightforward and as transparent as you think it is.
So I just read a piece of research from Harvard, 2000 professional service firms, marketing, tech, and so on and so forth. And the finding was that in 85 to 90% of cases, don't understand why they're a bit vague about it, but 85 to 90% of cases, the winning supplier is on the day one list. So when they say, oh, we need an agency, or we need a PPC agency, or we need a go-to-market agency, or we need a marketing agency, whatever it is they say. And on day one, they say, who should we be talking to? And they list off the 4 or 5 names of people they kind of know and they think they should be talking to. If you're not on that list, because of your top of the funnel marketing, because of the awareness that you've created for yourself, it's pretty unlikely you're going to win the business.
Yeah,
I think that's, for me, that's I find that really profound, because that's what's that saying is all this stuff about closing and bottom of the funnel and is all very well, but the likelihood is you need marketing with a capital M in the first place to stand a chance to be on that list. How does that fit into your ology?
well, I suppose then we should move to talking about like the 8 pillars, because to answer the 3 questions, you must master those 8 pillars, right? And the first one is discovery. So it's understanding where the business sits, the competitive landscape, and what your customers or prospects think of your business. That's the first thing, right? So you understand that. Then you do your customer intelligence. So now you're researching your personas, you're doing your jobs to be done, you're understanding what your segments are, what your ICP is versus who your personas are, right? Number 2. Then you're going to build into your product or service value, right? Positioning, messaging, storytelling, value prop, all of that stuff, right? That fits there. Then your pricing strategy. How are you priced in the market to your peers? I mean, most people don't even know. They just like do their price and haircut. Let's do that, right? And away they go. And they're not talking to people to understand what the value of what they offer is to the perfect buyer, right? Sales enablement, how we enable people to buy from us? What materials do we need to create to enable my champion to run back internally and communicate to the multitude of other decision makers who don't really care what your value is, so you don't just become the PPC guy or the go-to-market guy. You're actually, these people have value, so you need to enable them, and the Chinese whispers is not going to help you, right? And so what are the marketing tactics that are going to enable you to communicate that value out? And then how do you open up the top of the funnel? And then you get into onboarding, and then any, further feature, product, service development. That kind of completes the loop. And that loop should be spinning and spinning and spinning. And that will push your flywheel round and round and round, because you're doing everything right.
Okay. So that's a lot. I mean, that's a whole business in a way, in terms of I'd be interested in your take on what I call efficiency versus intimacy.
Yep.
So we come across a lot of agencies that go off to whoever it is in Ukraine or Czechoslovakia. They scrape LinkedIn for 100,000 names. They bombard 100,000 people with a 10-step email campaign. They end up with 50 about a month later, with all this work that turns into 25 conversations, turns into 5 proposals, turns into a piece of work, and there's just data and noise everywhere. So that's that kind of efficiency, aren't we efficient type route.
Yep.
And then at the other end, there's, why don't you just go out for lunch with people 3 times a week and talk to them, and they'll know people who will be able to make introductions to you. So we've got this intimacy, hand-holding piece, and then you've got this machine thing.
Yep.
I'd be really interested to know where you sit on that. Are you all on one side, all on the other side? Is it
I'm in both camps.
Everything? You're both camps.
I'm in both camps. I think look, when you first start this process, right? And if we go back to the adage of your net worth is in your network, we love that one, right? When you first start networking, there's a high likelihood, unless you come out of a big agency or a big consultancy and then start, that you probably don't have the network that you need, right? So you start in a low grade network of people, and that might get you a few leads, right? But ultimately, the job is to keep learning. Now, AI absolutely changed the game on the 8 pillars, right? Because I can tell you now, if I was working flat out for someone, I could probably do the customer research, competitive intelligence in 2 or 3 days, because as long as you have first party data, which is really crucial for this,
Yeah.
so good CRM data, that is a game changer for you. And then with these agents, you can actually put most of this on automation, right? So now we're talking about changing the business model to reflect the world we operate in, that is using and analyzing your data, that probably can analyze the performance data that you have with your own clients and show you how to better improve that performance, right? So some of this doesn't need to be done 9 times a year, right? It kind of gets done, and then it's more the win-loss interviews, the persona interviews, and all those other things that take place consistently that keep giving you the information you need, because over time markets become more educated, or buyers become more educated, they need to do less research, they start to know who the players are, and so you're competing against that. So the marketing thing that you talked about, 100% is in need. PPC returns are going through the floor, so like you just avoid it. And so that means bigger presence, using video, investing in tools that can repurpose that very easily for you, which are probably AI based, and then going out and speaking with people, but always thinking about strategic networking, right? Don't just rock up to every cheap networking thing on Eventbrite for 20 quid or less and expect to grow your business, right? You've got to be super targeted, understand who's going to be there, make sure you whittle it down to 4 or 5 people that you can have really good conversations with while you're there, and get in and get out.
So reading between the lines, what you're saying is that the agency folk that are listening today could take the book and they could apply it to their own agency's marketing. One.
Yep.
The cleverer ones take the model and they could apply it in their clients.
That one. And that was the whole thing. It was, how do you pretty much automate the consultancy agency service? And so, you know, it's gone from idea to execution to book, and now we're building it out as a software platform. So, you know, the movement has gone across, and this is pretty much, Rob, driven by a conversation we had at GYDA. You know, we talk about, well, you talked about the thought leaders practice, right? And to a degree, I think I'm somewhere between a consultant and a thought leaders practice. Like when I look at that kind of application of what we're doing, but I think in a world of differentiation where AI makes everything more vanilla, it really comes down to what you know, what you hold, and how what you hold makes you different to other people.
So we kind of slightly glibly passed over the 8 pillars in terms of pillars are really interesting. And as you said, it's not rocket science, but it's an order and there's a structure and there's stuff there. Could you pick out of those pillars, you know, the 2 or 3 aha ideas that you believe that when people see them, they go, "Ooh, I like that. I'm going to break the binding in the book and I'm going to photocopy it and give it to other people." Because that's the biggest test of how good your book is when people break the binding and photocopy it, so to speak.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick 4 of the 8, it would be discovery, because discovery is about the competition and your own audience. I'd pick customer intelligence because it's completely about your own audience. Then I would pick product value because it's about communicating your value to your audience. And then I'd pick onboarding because it's about, once I've sold to you, how am I going to keep you? And that means you have to talk and to your audience. So what the theme that runs through this is, if you're not talking to your client base and your potential customer base, and potentially even your competition's customer base, you've got a problem. You have a problem.
So let's just dig in a bit to product value, know, which I think is one of the biggest problems that agencies have, which is what we do is fantastic, it's amazing, and it's like, so where's the ROI? Well, between you and me, it's very difficult to demonstrate it. Yeah, but when you go in front of a client, you say, for every £1,000 you give me, I'm going to give you 100 leads or 100 clicks, whatever it is. That's what you do. So you need to, in my mind, you need to approach the value that you add head on. You need to be able to say to a client, you gave me £1,000, and in return for that £1,000, I gave you more than other people, and what I gave you was this. But agencies seem to be really kind of nervous about that, and they kind of flip into, I'll tell you what we'll do, we'll just charge 10% of the PPC price, or I'll tell you what we'll do, we'll do a retainer for however many £1,000 a month, and we'll kind of muzzy it all up, because I know what we're meant to be about is helping people get clients, but actually it's kind of really tricky, especially these days. So we'll just and what happens is that the client just works with an agency which is less rubbish than the last one.
Yep.
I'm leaving the last one because we were giving them so many £1,000 a month, we never got anywhere. They sent us endless reports that made no sense to us. They pulled us in for meetings that made no sense. All I wanted was 100 leads for every £1,000. That's what they promised, and so my question is, how should agencies demonstrate and talk about the value that they offer?
That's a really good question. And obviously the first answer is it depends on what it is that you offer.
Sure.
But I, like, in our business, we now have guarantees. Like our guarantee is, if you run a rise, we will reduce customer acquisition costs by up to 20% because it's been proven. We pulled it out of our data, and we will reduce churn within 90 days. So, or we'll work for free. That's kind of our guarantee, right?
Wow.
And so we know that because we've looked at our typical account behavior. We've seen where the numbers go. Look, 20% is the highest end, right? So we're not guaranteeing you 20%. It's up to, but it's also not going to be 1%, right? So what we have to look at the data to be realistic. And I think that if you're not an analytical company, if you're just thinking about the sale and the revenue, then you're not even really thinking about the customer. It's all about you. And so therefore you're never going to want to change, because you've probably got a load of people in the office that are not interested in the customer. They just want to get their salary and go home every month, right? And as long as you're paying that, they're happy, right? But I don't want that. I actually want people to go, if you work with Paul, you will get good results. Now, the thing is, 20% for a small company can be as big as 2% in an enterprise company, right? So it is, when we laugh at between 1% and 20%, when you put it into, like, 60% of my business is with startups, 20% is with the enterprise, right? And that's how our business spreads. And so it's like, okay, down market, we're probably going to achieve a higher shift, but up market, the smaller shift is still big revenue because the numbers that they're dealing with. And in my book, we've got two case studies. One is like a 2-person company, and the other one's a $1 billion company that sells to other $1 billion companies, right? So the spread is available. So you should be prepared to offer some guarantee, right? And you have to be careful of what it is you're offering, but you should be able to offer some guarantee. If a customer wants to know what you get back, surely by now, if you've been doing PPC for 3-6 years, you must know how to analyze an account to see where the efficiencies are, right? So you might say, well, look, we do an upfront analysis, which costs you X. And out of that, we'll work out what the potential savings are, whether it's efficiencies or blah, blah, blah. Now, some people don't care about efficiency and they don't want that. They just want the leads in the funnel, right? And it's a different thing. But yeah, you have to get into a point of, I can say quite honestly, I can achieve these types of results for you based on our historical service. You said PPC there. I've got a client that's just fired their PPC agency because they just said they've optimized our account so much that when we haven't seen any further optimization for months, so we're not paying the agency fee for no further optimization. They've set up the ads. We own the account. We fired them, and now we'll just let those ads run. So be careful of just being complacent.
Yeah, and that's because I want to pay my agency based on the value they add.
Yeah.
Not just I don't want to just pay their wages. Cool. And then you say so. 3 questions,
8
8
pillars,
pillars, 5
5
steps.
steps. Yeah.
Go on, hit me with the steps.
So the 5 steps become our RISE methodology. So that's our big differentiator. We've got our own trademarked RISE methodology. 5 steps: assess, research, ideate, strategize, execute. Simple. Doesn't
Yeah.
frighten anyone. It's not confusing. Really easy to understand, which your own methodology should be, because if it feels like it's something too weird and wonderful, it will always be too weird and wonderful and you'll never sell it, right? So what we do is we take stock of where the business is today, and we understand that. We analyze all of your data. We understand what the team strengths are. We talk to this leadership team. We do all of the good stuff. Then we go out and we do the discovery and the customer intelligence and understand how your audience understands your product value. So that's like the research stage. And then you combine that in the ideation stage, and we go in a room, cross-functional teams, and we want anyone who speaks to a customer to be in attendance, and we start throwing ideas at the wall of what might need to change. That could be processes, it could be approach, it could be the sales and marketing don't believe the ICP is the same thing, or the personas are the same thing. All these things come out, and then you really look at what's going to make the big impact. And you might even have 2 approaches. You might say low-hanging fruit, big impact. So there's always something moving along. So then you've got the strategize stage. So once you've got all of that, you've assessed them, you've researched the market and the audience, and you've come up with all the big ideas. Now your job as the agency is to bring that together in a cohesive strategy over a 12-month period, which you should be able to do, and you should have significant transformation from all of that work, right? And then finally you execute on that against your given KPIs, and away you go. And then next year you go back through a RISE and you do that again, and then you do it the year after, and that's how it works. And that starts to spin the flywheel.
Okay, so I get. So in a way, you're showing partially behind the kimono, for want of a better phrase. I can't think of a better way of putting it. This is kind of how we do stuff. But they're never going to be Paul Sullivan, and they're never going to be your team. So they're never going to be able to quite emulate what you're doing. But I'm just wondering about the purpose of the book. Is the purpose of the book lead magnet? Is the purpose of the book thought leadership and education? Is it promotional? Is it just something you had to do? Is it something that you had to do in order to make sense of what you were doing? What's the purpose behind the book?
I think at all times there's a couple of things, right? It was to position myself as a thought leader. It was also that if you position yourself as the right thought leader and you can solve real world challenges, then the work will come. That's a given. Well, at least the inquiries will come, at least, right? And that was it. They're the 2 things that I wrote it for. I fundamentally believe that because we were in an age of growth at all costs, agencies blossomed because everyone was throwing money left, right, and center. Now, all of a sudden, the VCs have turned the money off and the agencies are suffering, right? So now you have to differentiate yourself. And being a HubSpot agency or offering PPC, it is not enough. It simply isn't enough anymore, right? And actually, if you're in the transactional end of the market, you are banging trouble, right? That's why we sit in strategy, because I want to experience my life with the C-suite, having lunches, talking about business strategy and long-term goals and achievements, rather than worrying about are they going to sack me for the latest AI tool that can optimize my ads, write better copy, storybrand.ai is out there, so they don't even need a marketing strategy. And it's like, do you know what? If you're in the delivery part of this world, you are under immense pressure. It is time to differentiate, get out, and become a thought leader. But you need to really have something, right? It's hard to be a thought leader if you feel that ChatGPT can do it for you.
That's the wrong end of the stick. I mean, I will keep on going back to how you add value to the client.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would argue that, to your point, You want to be in the boardroom. And one of the things that really hacks me off is that digital marketing has taken ownership of the word marketing, and it's not.
Yeah.
Digital marketing, my friends, is like glorified ads in the back of the local evening paper, the classified ads. That's all it really is. You pay money and you get your little square. And it is subsumed marketing, as in, why should people buy from you, as in what are the values and who do you appeal to, and at what price are they willing to pay for you, and all that kind of stuff. And so when people talk about marketing consulting, most people are really talking about flogging digital marketing. I think the sweet spot is kind of near where you are, which is we're talking about marketing and we've got a team that can execute, because if you're an agency, I'll stop because this is my bugbear at the moment. If you're an agency and you're all into execution, digit monkeys, it's nearly impossible to sell strategy, because why should people believe that you can go up into the C-suite? But if you're in the C-suite and talking strategy, you can then have the conversation to say, and we've got a team that can do this, but can I make a suggestion that you put out to 3 different agencies, including mine? I'll write the brief, obviously. And you give the work to the best people. That seems to be a logical way forward, to be having the grown-up conversations, as you say, having lunches and looking at the wonderful view, and have the capacity to deliver. But the capacity to deliver, especially with AI and with outsourced from all over the world, isn't what it was. It's like you used to run an agency, you have 25 people all in a row, all whacking away at the keyboard. You're selling them all for twice what you're paying them for. Do the sums, you make the money, a little bit of overhead, that's fine. That model, I think, is dead, and that's why this model is so interesting.
100%. Like so for one of my customers, just give you a quick case study. You mentioned this. So private charter company, aircraft charter company, started off with the Frankenstein's tech stack. They then went to a custom build CRM, which didn't work. And then we showed them how they could do what they're trying to achieve on HubSpot and let HubSpot take care of the dev work, right? So we did that. We custom built a booking system inside the CRM for them, specifically for that business and the way that they work. And then that was like 98% of everything they needed, but it's 2% HubSpot didn't do. So we bought in a robotic process automation company that does AI. And now, is it Claude that you can log into other systems? The one bit they needed to go and log into this other system first and then get something and then put it back to HubSpot. So I was like, let's bring in an AI company, and they built a workflow that basically mimics that for them. And now he's not even thinking about headcount growth for his operations. He can grow sales, he can grow the business exponentially every other way, but he does not have to worry about the operational part of that, and his CRM and his billing and his invoicing and all of that, all in there. So now he's thinking, how do I now apply AI to all my other businesses that I own? Because all of a sudden, I don't need headcount anymore. And also what he can do is he can make sure he's got human beings for his customer service. And that's kind of an anomaly, because everyone's like, well, let's just get an AI agent. And I'm like, well, yes and no, because the most frustrating thing for anyone is when they're trying to wait for your agent to give them that little spark that says, oh, now when you can request to speak to somebody, because that is the most frustrating piece of digitized customer support, right? It's press 9, press 4, press 3.
And that's back to this thing about engagement and intimacy versus efficiency. Way too many businesses go heavily down the efficiency thing. Think about trying to get anything out of a bank. My bank, bless their cotton stocks, still tell me that I've got my birthday wrong. I've been in 5 times with my passport, and yet whenever I try and log in, they go, and what's your birthday? And I go, my birthday. They go, that's wrong. I go, I really don't think so. And it's like, well, our system says. I said, well, could you go back into the bank? And it's like the whole purpose of this thing was to give me ease of access.
Yeah.
And they just shoot themselves in the foot the whole time. Right, we're coming up to the end of our time. It's a real shame because we could actually go through every step again and again and again and go detail. I guess I what in your, now that people have seen the book and read the book, what are the one or two big themes that are coming out of the book, and more importantly, what's the one thing you want to drill into people's heads as a result of reading the book?
So it's a really good question. And I know you asked me to prepare for it, and you know my brain works far too broadly to do that, Robert. So I would say, I would say that the best takeaway is 385. That is the takeaway. You can simplify your go-to-market to 3 questions, 8 pillars, and 5 activities. And that is easy, manageable, and cross-functional. So you're a 5-person agency, you can do that with 5 people. You're a 2-person agency, you can do it with 2 people. You're a 250-person agency, you do it with the right people, and you still get it done. So for me, the best thing about this book is it breaks it down to 3 questions, which you can answer 5 steps, which means that it's not hard to actually follow the process. And then once you understand those 8 pillars, Rob, you probably, if they get those 8 pillars right, they won't even need GYDA anymore, because this is the thing, right? I'm joking, but you understand what I'm saying. It's like we all need coaching. We're always going to need coaching. So,
Yeah. But I think there's something there about, and we've all done it with loads of books. I mean, it kind of feels like there needs to be a workbook that you can write in, or an online workbook.
Which there is. There's a portal that goes alongside the book, right? And you can access that. It's now available on Kindle. It's in all the major bookstores. It's in Barnes and Noble and Waterstones and Foyles and all those places, which is great. And I think we've just been licensed for Audible and Apple iBooks and all of that. So,
are you going to be doing the Audible?
I'm not, thank God. Nobody needs that.
They don't want that. I think a huge achievement. Okay, I think people really underestimate the work that goes into a book, because it's not just the 237 pages. It's actually getting all your thoughts in the right order, and it's all the stuff that you've deleted, and all the taking it on the chin when someone's editing it and saying, actually, I think that should be bigger, that should be shorter, or that should be at the top. It's a mammoth task. So hat tip for doing that. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the book takes off, who reads it, how they read it, because you know what you want people to do with it. But one of the things I always find fascinating about books is you think, chapter 3 and 5, they're the crackers. And then you meet people at conferences and they go, chapter 4, fantastic. And you go, what about chapter 3 and 5? And they go, don't remember that, but chapter 4 is really, really good. You have to go back yourself and go, what is it that they... So it no strategy survives confrontation with the enemy, as you know. So really well done. Thanks so much for taking the time to explain and share the book. We'll put all the links and everything below. And it just leaves me, as ever, to say it's always a pleasure to talk with you, Paul. I love your energy, I love your enthusiasm, but more importantly, I love the fact that this stuff actually works, and that's what really matters. So thank you very much for being our guest.
Thanks for having me on, Rob. Appreciate it.